Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Archive Speaker Meeting. Can we please have a moment of silence for the alcoholic who still suffers, followed by the Serenity Prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We ask that you please take a moment now to silence your cell phones out of respect for your fellows. And we will pass the basket in honor of our seventh tradition, which states every AA group ought to be self-supporting, declining outside contributions. $15 will go towards rent of this meeting space, and the rest will go to District 17. And I'm going to read the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Welcome to the Racine Area Archives Speaker Meeting, consistent with Alcoholics Anonymous General Service Archives mission. Our purpose is to document permanently the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, to make the history of the organization accessible to AA members and other researchers, and to provide a context for understanding AA's progression, principles, and traditions. Is there anyone here with less than 30 days of sobriety? This is not to single anyone out, but just to welcome you. Is there anyone here with more than 15 years of sobriety? There probably is. It's pretty dark in here, but welcome. The speakers selected for this meeting are old-timers. An AA old-timer is any member who has been continuously sober for a significant period of time. The definition of significant is open to interpretation and varies widely. For the purpose of this meeting, an old-timer is considered anyone with 20 years or more of sobriety. The old-timers interviews serve as a representation of the significant impact that long-term sobriety can have on our AA community. And then without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker. Our speaker for tonight is Mike Kay. All right, and we have some questions for you, Mike.
I'm excited. Bring it.
All righty. First question, what is your sobriety date?
Christmas in 1987. I think the last day that I drank was the 26th of December. And I was probably cleaned up somewhere between Christmas and New Year's that year in 1987.
Wow. All right. Who was the president of the United States when you joined Alcoholics Anonymous?
Ronald Reagan.
Wow.
We clapping because I remembered that, or? I had to look it up, no.
When and where was your first contact with Alcoholics Anonymous?
A couple of weeks after I stopped drinking. I woke up on the 27th of December and knew that the end was there, and that I could no longer drink without it turning into what it always turns into. And I made some phone calls, and that got me into a outpatient treatment program. I was going there for 2 or 3 weeks, and I was going to look this up. I did one time. Sometime around the middle of January on a Saturday night, I came to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The reason why I came was because the therapist or the treatment counselor was very interested in what I was going to do for long-term sobriety. I didn't know what he was talking about, but he seemed to think that AA was going to have a big part of that. So I came here after I said I was going to come and didn't come. Then I said I was going to come the following weekend. I didn't come. We spent a couple of sessions on my inability to follow through with things that I'd promised to do. And so I came that Saturday, and my first meeting was here, and it was down in the corner room, and is where I met the first guy to have a huge, there were two guys that had a huge impact on me on that first meeting. The first guy, and he seems to show up in all these stories around here, was Bob. What was Bob's last initial? Mark, do you know?
We just call it Louis.
Yeah, well, I was going to try to not be disparaging, but so they call him Billy Goat Bob. And Bob was sober for a while. He was definitely more than 10 years. He never said how long, but he'd been around for a while. He was a Skid Row, and he was here, and he looked very similar to Charles Manson. And I happened to be sitting next to him in my best white tweed sport coat and a pink Hawaiian shirt in the middle of January at my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and was really kind of jacked up on not smoking pot and not drinking for 3 weeks, both of which were world records. And I must have spent more time than I needed to as a new guy explaining all that, because Bob didn't seem impressed and suggested that I go to many different groups that ended in A. And then the guy, a couple of guys later, was guy was here. Had been sober continuously for 5 years. He was one of my good drinking buddies' brother, and I found it remarkable that we drank in the same sphere somewhat. And he had stumbled in here, and he had gone 5 years, which seemed like an eternity, without having to drink. And he said, I remember two things that he said. One, he had to put forth as much effort into not drinking as he did drinking, and that he came here a lot. And he talked to me after the meeting, he gave me a ride home, gave me a ride to my next meeting and the next meeting, and by about 2 weeks in, without knowing it, I think I started to get hooked here, because I needed a transition from the old life into a new life. It turns out this is what it was. I didn't know that then, but looking back, that's how it turned out.
Gotcha. Okay. Can you describe what Alcoholics Anonymous was like back then compared to today?
I've thought about this a lot. Dave Lyons and I were just talking about it a minute ago. I'd say a couple things. One, I think it's no different. It's full of alcoholics, right? So there's no different. If you go back and read the big book in 1935, it was written in 38 based off of 75 to 100 people's experience and what they did, and they found they were sober. And when you read that, and if you can identify with that, how much different was it in 1935 than it is now in 2024? Pop culture was different. Language was a little different, the way they wrote, the way we write today. But other than that, alcoholics are alcoholics, right? So I think it's the same. The only difference I see between now and 87 when I got here was the pop culture was different. That was about it. Some would say, I've heard some people that were, upon further review, that it was pretty tough on them. They were here a couple, 2, 3 years, and nobody had mentioned the book, or they hadn't worked the steps, and they were batshit crazy, and they were miserable, and they found somebody that could help them work the steps, and their life's been amazing, and they're here still today. I think that's terrific. My case, I got here, and I'd left basically, I was in a bar every day since I was 18. No, well, a couple of years prior, but legally, since I was 18. I loved bars. I loved everything about bars. And so I'd left that all day, every day lifestyle and desperately needed help. So I came here, and I really believe that if I would not have transitioned into this quickly, you'd have a different speaker here tonight, for sure. So what was the transition to this? For me, it started, I came here every day, same way I did in a bar. Along the way, when I came here every day, I was exposed to obviously what we share in the meetings. I was exposed to the things that we do after the meetings. I was exposed to the things we did between the meetings. And I was exposed to what it took for how we started the 4:30 meetings, because some of us that summer couldn't wait till 8 o'clock. Right? It was summer '88, very hot. And I watch young people get sober today. And I see them, it seems to me, the ones that survive the first year are the ones that come here and come here a lot, get involved. Sponsorship, I think, is a lot stronger as far as, when I got here, my first sponsor was the guy that I just talked with a lot. And he talked about being humble and not letting the ego run the show. And that's basically what we talked about. Well, I think that's kind of what the steps are for. But he was a big deal in my life. And so, to me, the way it was then is very similar to the way it is now. There just seems to be a little bit more you-rah-rah as far as I got a sponsor. I'm working the steps. And people are in their fourth step say the same things they did when I was first sober. I'm in the middle of a four-step. At one time or another, we're all in the middle of a four-step. And it's God-forsaken. It's the worst experience of our life. Mainly because I'm sure you have the same problem that I had. That damn thing that goes between here and meeting this paper. I just had a hell of a time with that. Really tough time of it. Once I did that, and once I actually found out I was supposed to write, then it became pretty easy. But it's 5, I love 5. I don't mind talking about myself. I love therapy for that. Right? Never had any problem with that. Didn't have any problem telling God. I knew he knew anyways. It was me coming to grips with the way I'd lived. That was the hard part.
Gotcha. What were you like as a newcomer, and how do you think others would describe you when you were a newcomer?
Ginger Wheeler, remember her? I think Fox knew her. She used to tell me when I was about 6, we'd been around for a while, and I was 6, 7 months sober. And she goes, I thought you were just an arrogant jerk. I says, was it the pink Hawaiian shirt or the white tweed sport coat that threw me off? But by that time, we'd become friends. Dick Shirk was one of the guys that was a friend of mine. He had been here maybe a year before I got here. And he'd try to kind of, he ended up becoming my friend because he had a way of getting me to help him do other things for other people, right? So I think he could tell. One time he asked me if I'd do something to help him. I told him I was going to be busy doing something else. And he looked at me and he said, you mean to tell me that Christ died for our sins and you're going to go do what you want to do? It was about Good Friday. And I thought, who the hell talks like this? Who asks anybody to do this? And he asked it in such a way where I said, what time are we meeting? And it was actually a huge turning point in my life at that. I was 2-3 months sober. I went with him, and it turns out we were helping somebody move. And back then it was awesome because we moved her out of a 3-bedroom house into a 2-bedroom apartment above the buildings in Uptown. So we had to take all that stuff and go up those rickety steps on the back of those apartments up there. And there was probably 30 of us there. It was the most remarkable thing I ever saw. I think we did it in like a couple 2 hours. Laughed, cried. First time I'd ever gotten a hug from all the people I noticed that were hugging each other, but they weren't hugging me when I was new. So if you're new and you notice everybody's paying attention to each other, go help somebody do something. That's like the number one way you can get in and get involved and feel like you're a part of.
Alrighty. Who was your first sponsor and how did you end up with them?
Well, as I said, it was Kent J. And he comes on Wednesday mornings now, still. And he was the most, probably had more impact on me getting here and staying here in my first few months than anybody else I had. It was not the sponsor-sponsee relationship that I have with guys I sponsor. It's probably not a sponsor-sponsee relationship that I see many people have. But in my case, it was the perfect situation for me to get in here and to be hooked in and to come back, right? So, huge. After him, it was Danny B, because Danny B was a little bit closer to the lifestyle I had hoped to have. And he talked about mourning the loss of a lifestyle, because when I was about 6 months sober, I really struggled with being in AA and missing the lifestyle. And every once in a while, I'd leave an AA meeting and go sit in the bar and drink 7-Up or whatever the hell it was. And it was funny, people really in the bar were going, wow, I haven't seen you in a while, you look great. And I'd gone, 6, 7, 8 weeks without having anything to drink. And being a quart-a-day vodka guy, and you stop that, you're going to physically look a little better in time. And they had noticed. And what I did know is that was a Friday night. The following Friday night, I went back and I was waiting to go in and have them tell me how great I was again. And in a bar, they're only interested in hearing about your new way of life once. When I came back the second time, they were not interested. They didn't want to hear about it. They would just, I'm not going to talk to you about it. I want to, it's nice for you. Sometimes when you run into people that you were associated with and they felt like you were like them and you're like them, they don't want to hear about you doing good, because they start to feel like maybe I got a thing. And I never wanted them to ever feel like that, but some used to get a little angry with me if I told them how my life was. So it kind of I had to mourn the loss of that lifestyle. That was what Danny B once said. And I went, you know what you're talking about. Sometimes, is church going to start? What was that? I felt like when I was an altar boy, we used to have to kneel there and they'd go like this and we'd ring the bell. And sorry, I digress. And he also was like a sponsor that I talked to a lot. Helped me through a lot of different life issues at the time. Again, it really wasn't like you hear today. It was huge for me at the time I was there. And about a year later, there was this friend of mine that had been in AA. I think he had done like 25 written inventories, probably 30-some fifth steps already by then. And I went up and said, could you help me with the inventory? And he said, I'll see you on Sunday. So I tried to write down a bunch of shit. I wrote down one little paragraph about something that bothered me is really what it was. And we went there. I read it to him, and then we went through the book and we talked about some things, but what we mostly talked about was secrets, right? Those secrets that they're so secret from yourself that you don't even know they're there, right? Those were my secrets. Things that I'd done to others, and maybe in some cases things that were done to me that I just tried not to ever think about. And all of a sudden that day he goes, yeah, tell me your darkest secret. And I told him, and I said, I'll be damned, I never think about that. So we must have been doing something right. Then we got on our knees and we said that third step prayer together, and it had a tremendous impact in my life. He wasn't my sponsor either. Sometime later, I got a little goofy when I was 3 years sober. I was so goofy, I went to this one guy who was the big book, came here with more knowledge of the big book than anybody, and sponsored a lot of people through the steps, helped me through the steps. And then ultimately, I think I was about 10 years sober, I got this guy from up in Brookfield who was my sponsor, and he's still my sponsor today. We've had a few years off for my bad behavior, but aside from that, he's been my sponsor for a long, long time. We've worked the steps together. I talk to him at least once a week. Now, history of sponsorship in my life.
Gotcha. All right. It sounds like you've already mentioned a few, but who were the alcoholics who were prominent in your early sobriety?
Well, those guys for sure. I was thinking about, every time I see Dave, I was thinking about the Alano Club guys back in the day. And there was one guy I worked with at Webster Electric, his name was Art Conrad. Art Conrad. I had no idea. He had trained me on like a couple different jobs. He was an interesting guy, always was smiling, always smoking Pall Mall cigarettes. And one day I got sober maybe inside the first year, and I go to the Alano Club on a Saturday night, and there's Art Conrad. I said, I'll be damned. And when I got talking to him, he used to he was like the repair guy or something. He would just take big old gears and throw them down on Monday mornings just to see who was hungover. He'd throw them down in a pan. I says, is that what you were doing? Yeah. So he was one of the guys. Frank Will, was that the guy that had the arm? He was one. One of my favorite characters of all time was Gordy Laring. Irish guy with the Irish accent. There was some of the old guys, they were always ratting each other out, it seemed like. I said, he don't even have an Irish accent. That's just a game that he plays. But he talked about, he was basically a locksmith and a lock picker, and he was involved with chop shop stuff and had to go to prison. So he was a character on a bunch of different levels. I liked him a lot. I discovered there were some guys here that came every Tuesday night, and they'd be up here, and it seemed like they had their own meeting up here. And so one day, I don't know, me and somebody else came up, we snuck up here, and I was listening to them. And they were all older guys. We consider they old timers. There were a couple of them guys that had more than 10 years sobriety. It was just crazy to see. Jerry Alsek was one of them. Barney, the carpenter, I remember. There were, a few of those guys. I actually ended up going to every Tuesday night. I'd go to the meeting and sit with those guys. Eventually, everybody else kind of came. It was a big meeting we had in the back there. There were also some guys that were maybe only sober a couple of years ahead of me that were big deals, I thought. Marty Ketch, the Smurf, he was huge. He was the kind of guy, he was going through a divorce. He was going through a difficult time. And he would grab a new guy like me and say, come on, kid, let's go get a pizza. Pizza was a big deal for early sobriety back in those days. Jerry Schumann. I was just looking at it. There's a little camel over there with a 2-year coin on it. Jerry Schumann made those. And when I saw that, I thought of him. He's up in Appleton now, still sober all these years. I mentioned Dick Shirk was a friend of mine. Red Haas and I got sober together. Right? I was like a Red. It was funny. It seems like after we die here, it almost seems like we were saintly when we were here. Jesus Christ. I knew Red. I was glad to get sober with Red, but Red. We all had our own, walk here in AA, and his was as funny as anybody's. And young Bob Cruisinger also was a great guy. He was a car salesman, and he'd gotten in a lot of big trouble. And he came to AA, he was sober about 6 months, went home and told his wife, you stick with me. We're going places. He had just got a job selling cars or something. And his wife says, you son of a bitch, you're the one that got us in this trouble. And because he was in trouble with the law. Nice guy. It's hard to believe he would have broke the law ever. And then probably my favorite, there was a little old lady. She used to sit at the table right outside of the long room. She would get there, put her little pad on her chair, and she'd sit there, grab her cards, and shuffle them up. And there were all these older guys that come in, they'd start gathering around her, and they would play cribbage all afternoon. And she worked with Dave at the A Center, and they called her the Sarge. She was a tough old lady. She about this tall, right? And when she told her story, she talked about, getting drunk and stealing somebody's motorcycle and driving it through town. And but she was something. And if you got her down, if it was one-on-one and you were just talking about being sober, it was always the same message for her. Got to get rid of that ego, kid. The ego's got to go. You're not going to stay sober if the ego doesn't go. And I didn't know what she was talking about, but upon further review, she was right. So she was kind of a big deal, I thought, back then. Some others will come up, and I apologize if I didn't remember anybody, but afterwards you can tell me cool stories you got about old people if you'd like.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. I think that's all the time we have for the questions. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back, and Mike is going to share his experience, strength, and hope on a passage from the Big Book. All right, we're going to welcome Mike back up, and he's going to turn to a page in the AA Big Book and spend the remainder of the meeting time sharing his experience, strength, and hope on that reading. Welcome back, Mike.
My name is Mike Kay. I'm an alcoholic. Very, very glad to be here. I want to thank Sam B. for inviting me to do this. I want to thank Sam and Rachel. I talk more about Rachel, but she's not here, and I don't want to waste everybody's time. But these two people have done a great job of the Sunday night speaker meetings. Having the board out front and getting the groups to participate in this, I think it's been great for the community, so good job to them. And of course, Sam B., who, I don't know if this was your idea, Sammy, but I think that this archive things has really turned out well. I think this is about the 5th or 6th one, and I've been to almost all of them, and they're all pretty good. All right, Nick, we're going to have to start over. Come on back up here. No, we're going to be fine. Okay, so what I'm going to cover tonight is from the chapter A Vision for You. And after this meeting and after many meetings, they read that last page, you know. So I've been reading the whole chapter lately, and man, there's some stuff in there I like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read some of the things that jump out on me. I'll talk about it a little bit. So it won't be jumping around. It'll come succinctly. But I'll start with page 165. So for most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is a joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. But not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. And I'll tell you, ever since I was a young guy, all I ever wanted to do was be a party guy. And I became party guy extraordinaire. There were some that would call me the marathon man. Many of you have sat in any meetings with me at all. I said, I kind of would get towards the end especially. I would get started on a Wednesday and I'd go till Sunday night, and Mondays I'd be too sick to drink and lay there and couldn't go to work, and Tuesday I'd go to work, but I'd be really cranky and crabby and thinking about, I've got to lay off the vodka, or I got to stop drinking the brandy, or I got to just drink beer. Never really thought about drinking wine as a pastime. Sometimes it just happened that way. But by Wednesday, though, you just kind of, I worked second shift, and you just kind of get going throughout the course of the day, and it's not going to happen this week. I'm not going to do it. And you'd have this argument going on in your head. By about 8:30, it would be lunchtime. What we used to do, I worked at Webster Electric over on Clark Street. I'd go get in a car and drive over to 14th Street to Cliff's Liquor Store. I had the coldest beer in the whole town. And get a 6-pack of 16-ounce Pabst. God, I still love the idea. And drink 2 or 3 of those, and then roll up a big fatty, if you will. I don't know if we called it that then, but I think that sounds good today. And and smoke a joint and drink 2, 3 of those and go back to work. And I'll tell you what, the memory of Monday of when I wasn't going to do that again was gone. It was gone. And I'd say in my last couple of years of drinking, it might be much longer, it might have been forever really. It ended up, I got to that place where I couldn't get drunk and I couldn't get sober. I couldn't stand being drunk after 3, 4, 5 days, and I couldn't stand being sober for 2 or 3 days. And that's kind of where I ended up, where I went. So then we go back to the book. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself, as we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm. The chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did. Then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. And my last drink was in Butch's Tap on Douglas Avenue and St. Patrick Street. And I used to like to think, Clancy used to talk about this, but I used to like to think that I was seeking lower companionship. Turned out I was the lower companionship they were looking for. I lived in the 80s. If you don't think God doesn't take care of old men, small children, and drunks, I landed about 1982 or so. I landed on High Street. I lived right behind Snickers Bar. It was Helmut's house for people a little older. Now it's God, I don't even know what the hell it is. It's not even open. I go by there though and wonder, God, I used to love it there. And I lived 18 steps. I lived in a little apartment right behind it. Bartended a little, mostly drank. Across the street was another bar. It was called Somewhere Else. There was this big blonde-haired Norwegian-looking guy that was in there. He'd see me coming in and he'd fill up the glass, load her up really good. Figure that he'd keep him quiet, go back to his cribbage game and talk about me because he thought I wasn't and I wasn't. I was really in an out-of-body experience by the Sunday afternoons anyways, but he says, I loaded up that one. That'll keep him quiet for a while. And we didn't know, but jacked her back. Vodka. It's like I spoke drunkenese, but when it came to saying the word vodka, there was no alcohol that could hold you back as to saying that. It's clear as day. And he said, Jesus Christ, the stronger you make it for this guy, the faster he drinks them. Now, we're both in AA now, over 36 years, both of us, and we had no idea that we were talking about the physical allergy of the disease of alcoholism. And I still think that just tickles the shit out of me to think about that. We knew that, and our paths had crossed then, and they're here now, right? So the bottom line is that I was already on my way where I couldn't get drunk and I couldn't get sober. And that shivering denizens of his mad realm. I was there. I was all in there, right? We go back to the page. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at a jumping off place. He will wish for the end. My last time out, Christmas of 1987, I had kind of pushed away from my family. I didn't see my mom and dad for over a year. I'd pushed away from a lot of people that I hung out with. Some of them who liked me a lot tried to seek me out. They always wanted to know, they always asked me those questions. What is wrong with you? I always hated that question. I really did. Because I never knew how to answer it. So what the hell's the matter with you? I don't know. I knew there was something very, very wrong with me, but I didn't know what it was. And so in October, sometime that summer, I got my second OWI. And on top of that OWI was a possession charge, a hit and run charge, possession of paraphernalia. It was about a five. You ever do that where you get drunk and you get over and you get tickets? And they're like, back then they were pink. And they were sitting on top of my desk, and I'd woke up out of a blackout and they were all sitting there crumpled up. And I looked at them and I said, that can't be good. And kind of looked at one or two, and it all, you know, how a blackout just kind of coming out of the black tar that is your life, and it just works its way up, and the bubble just kind of opens up, and it goes, you remember this? Ah, Christ. What else? Here comes another memory up there. Ah, remember this? Ah, geez, yes, that's right. I hated waking up from blackouts. I just hated it. Nobody ever said to me, ever, God, were you a good time last night after a blackout? Never. They always looked at you funny. Go back into a bar where you were in a blackout the night before. Oh, actually, it's worse than that. One time, I think it was like opening day Brewer game in 1980 something, and we were on a bus from Hammis's bar. It's not there anymore, so I can blow their anonymity. And we went up to the Brewer game. We had some bars after, and it was a long night. And we were in the bars, probably 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And apparently I had taken inappropriate liberties with somebody's backside that I didn't know. And apparently she didn't like it. And that was the last I'd thought of it. And the next day, I got with all them same guys, and we went out to go see this guy who lived out on Highway A. We were at his house. And we were there. It turns out it was his wife that I had taken indecent liberties with that I didn't even remember. And she was very, very mad. She didn't yell at me or anything, but later on I found out a few days later that somebody said, do you know, I think her name was Barb, you know what you did to Barb? She couldn't believe it. You were in her house. She's, oh my God, I felt awful. I remember being at a wedding another couple months later, and her and I were talking. She goes, I cannot believe that I'm talking with you. I don't like you. Apparently she did. Turn the clock, a few years later, I'm sober in AA, couple years, hanging out at the Grove Club, and there this Barb is. I'm sitting in a meeting with her. And I went, Barb? So after the meeting, we were talking. And she goes, I still can't believe I talked to you. I remember that like crazy. I says, what are you doing here? She goes, well, Ricky and I broke up and I drank too much wine and my dad's in AA, so I came to AA. And I went, oh, well, here we are, 1,000 points of light tying us all back together, and we always end up here. I digress. That wasn't a story I was thinking about till just now. So he cannot picture life with or without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to manage that life either with it or without it. That led me up to Christmas in 1987. I've already talked a little bit about what that looked like. Vision for You continues on with, we have shown how we got out from under, you say, it says we have shown, so the folks that wrote the big book says, we have shown how we got out from under. And you say, me say, yes, I'm willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? I read that today. I went, oh God, that's my story. Because when I was a couple, 2, 3 meetings in, I finally said, listen, I got a question about this. So we're not drinking. So what do we do instead here? And, there's always somebody that jumps up, oh, it's wonderful. We have dances. And I just go back reading this going, how come they don't have, but am I consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, glum, and lame, like some of the righteous people? Because that sounded awfully lame to me. That was like 9th grade junior high school dance there. And I had a bad experience with that. So that wasn't going to help me stay sober. We have this and we have that. And it always seemed like there was like somebody in the meeting, maybe some of those guys that I'd mentioned earlier today that said, keep coming back. You'll find out. And it's the best direction / advice I've ever gotten at anything I've ever done in my lifetime. Keep coming back. We can't tell you what your path is going to look like. We know it's going to be remarkably better than the one that you're walking on now, but we don't know what yours is going to look like. But we do know that it's going to be remarkable. And they didn't say it, but there's a Pink song, What Would I Say to My 13-Year-Old Self? Something along those lines. Sam, help me out. And I was like, what would my 30-year-old self tell me now? What was a turning point for me back then? And that was, I don't know what the road's going to look like, but it's a hell of a lot better than what you're doing now. Let's give it a go. And so I gave it a go. And I kept coming back. And here's a couple of things that I ended up doing. So I asked, what do you do instead? And then it says, back to the book, it is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lies ahead. This we find in the fellowship, and so will you. I don't know anybody I've ever talked to that have given this thing a fair shake, that at certain time along the road here that they're just so darn grateful they can't stand it. I felt that way too. And they have all the tangible evidence that they can muster. Look at this, look at that. And the problem with the disease of alcoholism is that we go to bed grateful and we wake up and our head wants to tell us that that wasn't real and today is bleak. Now, which one is it? And usually I'm more inclined to follow the guy in front of me than to remember how cool it was yesterday. You know what I mean? So, what was the fellowship like for me? And if you were to ask me, what did I do that got me over many different bridges of despair sober? And, you still hear it today. I heard some guy say, I'm doing my 90 and 90. And upon further review, 90, I would say 90 meetings in 90 days. And maybe it would be better to say do as much AA as possible each day and then see what happens. Probably never for a good motive. I was going to 2-3 meetings every day. I met some guy that he went to 2-3 meetings a day. Sometimes he'd go to 4 just to see if he could get one meeting up on me. I wasn't going to have this. And so we would talk to each other at his establishment that the government was trying to take away from him. And so, you going to go to the meeting? No, I think I'm going to skip this one. Yeah, me too. I'd show up in the meeting and he'd be there. And I said, you lying? We were mad at each other for trying to outdo AA to the other guy, which I think it tickles the shit out of me even to this day. So I say maybe it's better if you just do as much AA recovery as possible. If you can come to 2-3 meetings a day, I don't know why you wouldn't. I understand. I was talking with a young lady today. She got 2 little kids at home and a husband that works, and she just can't leave her house every day. But she seems to be doing whatever she can to recover from this disease. A lot of phone calls, I think. So, back to the book. High and low, rich and poor, these are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties. You will escape disaster together. You will commence shoulder to shoulder with your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself, that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn that the full meaning of love thy neighbor, right? I always tell this story. Okay, so I got 5 more minutes. I think I'm just going to jump past this because otherwise we're going to run out of time. And the cool stuff I'm going to say is in the next 5 minutes, so hang in there. Some of the things that I said I did, I helped people move. That got me into fellowship. Fellowship equaled opportunity. I learned to say yes. I remember Danny B. and Kent J. came up to me and said, hey, we need somebody to be the secretary for this meeting. And they were not interested. Danny B. never took no for an answer from anybody. So I said, okay. And then he said, here's the envelope. You start the meeting, read how it works, collect the money, put it in the envelope, don't take the money, give it to the secretary of the club, treasurer of the club. I thought, oh my God, that's not a good idea. I have a tendency to spend money that's not mine. I'm really not a thief, but I just end up doing it, and I just never pay it back because I don't remember to pay it back. So it's really not my fault. And but the fellowship, it equaled opportunity. It's never, if you're new here, and somebody asks you to do something here, just say yes. And I'll say it's just a little editorial that has nothing to do with nothing except it's my opinion, and I think I say it better than anybody else, but I don't subscribe to doing service and service work. I like to think of it as all those things that I got to do, and everything that I got to do set me up to do the next thing. Right? So some of the things I learned here, I learned how to talk. I went to a meeting every day, and I shared when it was my turn to share. Right? I learned how to lead. So you're going to run the meeting. You're not going to spend their money. You're going to lead. You're going to start the meeting on time. You're going to make sure they got coffee. You're going to ask somebody to read how it works. You're going to close with the Lord's Prayer. This is where I learned how to accept and execute responsibilities. Those same 2 guys came up to me and said, we want you to run to be on the board. I was about a year sober. We want you to be on the board here at the Grove Club. You had to run for it. You had to show up. They had to vote you in. I was like, God, if I lose this, what the hell? And I got it. And I was on the board of directors, and I had whatever the responsibilities I got. And I got to watch guys like Jim Clay. He was a lawyer. He was on the board, and Green Dick and Danny B. And we had just got the club had just kind of overcame. This used to happen a lot. It hadn't happened in a few years, but sooner or later somebody takes all the money, and then we have to figure. And only in AA we got to figure out how to survive that and get back where we can pay the mortgage payment and pay to keep the building up. That's really the board's job. So I learned how I did that kind of stuff and to accept the responsibilities. I was on the board for 2 terms. I think it was 2 years, so about 4 years. Eventually I became the secretary. I learned how to write the notes. Then I became the treasurer. Big deal. Treasurer. And they go, don't take the money. This is a lot more money. And I couldn't get a checking account from anywhere I'm sure people have heard me tell this story, so I won't tell it for too long, but I couldn't get a checking account. But I was going to the Bank of Elmwood twice a week to take all the money from the Grove Club and writing the check, doing all of this. I'm handling, a $2,000 a month operation here. So I explained that to the vice president of the bank and asked him if he would, I told him my story and I told him that. And I said, I really need to have a checking account. I still got to go to a bar to cash my check. which wasn't exactly true. I could go to the Piggly Wiggly, do the same thing, but it just sounded a little more dramatic. And he said, come back, see me tomorrow. I came back the next day. We're going to let you have a checking account. If you bounce one check, you're done, and you'll never get a checking account in this town again. And I did. A year later, Ed Chamberlain, he's dead, I can't say his full name, was a realtor, and he got me to buy this little house. I couldn't believe it. I went through the process, and we got this little house down on Linderman and Lacer. Little tiny blue house in the back. It was kind of cute. Right around the same time, I had a girlfriend. She moved in with me. We got engaged. She got pregnant. We got married. We had a kid. All within a year and a half when I was 4 years sober. You talk about your life being unmanageable. But if I hadn't been doing what we were doing here, that wasn't ever going to happen. So when you think about, am I doing service to do service? Well, do service and see what happens. Because I learned how to do all of that stuff. Right around that same time, I'd learned how to lead, learned how to talk, learned how to do a lot of things. Was able to do a few other things. I ended up getting a new job and a new management position. I did that for 30 years, retired from it in the last year and a half. Remarkable. None of that happens without doing the things that we do here and taking the opportunity when somebody says, be on the board, run the meeting, come up with archives, sit up there and talk, clean up after we cleaned ashtrays, make sure you put the chairs in. All of those things. One other thing that I did, somebody said, come be on the board at the central office. I got to be I heard somebody else said they got to do that. I didn't argue with them. Maybe I did it before or after them, but I was the hotline chair. And back then, you had to go down there and switch the phone over at the phone, so you had to go there and do it. And if the guy didn't answer, then I had to switch it to my own house. So there was a lot of Sundays that I sat there being the hotline guy. And I had more non-alcoholics call that hotline just to have somebody to talk to. And I would talk with them, and the funny thing, I learned that the more I was listening to them talk about their stuff, the less I was listening to this thing. So the purpose of the hotline was not so much for them and saving them, but it was an action that got me out of here. And it still tickles me to think about those days. So I covered a little bit. So I got sober. I did this. I got this job. I got this car. I got this house. I got this here. I got my wife. I got my kids. I did blah, blah, blah. All good. Excellent life. Remarkable life. A guy like me was never going to have this life. I got a remarkable life. And so if you're sitting out there and you're new and going, wow, I'm really happy for you. That's kind of not what I'm trying to talk about tonight. What I'm trying to talk about is if the day my wife had a stroke and I was sitting up in the hospital with her family, and that was its own thing. And my buddy Mark came up, and it was like, I don't know if she's ever going to talk again. I mean, it was like a hell of a spot. And whenever I could, I'd come over here to the meeting, and I'd sit here. And some days I looked like nothing was wrong, and some days I was crying my eyes out because I had no idea what was going to happen. I had a little 18-month-old little girl at home. Turns out my wife couldn't take care of her by herself for about the next year and a half. God gave us somebody to take care of her until her mom got there. Remarkable stuff. Somebody gives you shit at work. All these different things that, God damn it, I'm going to drink. I can't believe it. I always loved this. I would say Danny. Danny, I want you to listen to me. I would never treat anybody like this. You understand that, right? But do you know what they did to me? I cannot believe they did that to me, because I would never, ever do that to them or anybody else. And he'd say something cute like, really? You want to talk about last week? Ah, shit. Okay, yes, I got your point, right? But while I was all caught up in myself and that thing, it was very real, right? And when I stayed sober on the day when it was very real, because I reached out to the next guy and he kind of, whoa down, big fella. That, I would say, is the greatest event that came to pass more than anything else that happened good. Right? Staying sober when my wife got real sick. Staying sober for the next couple of years, trying to figure out how to move things around and never had to. It just seemed like it always took care because somewhere along the way I made a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of God. And I didn't have to worry about those things. All I had to do was get up and do. Get up and do and get up and be. And the one thing that was the constant was I was always here. And the more I was here, the more the crazy parts of life, day-to-day responsibility of life, the more the great events come to pass. And what's the great event? That day when you don't drink on the day that you absolutely had to. That's the great events that they're talking about that come to pass. It doesn't sound very sexy, but it's a big deal, because consider, if you take a drink, all bets are off, right? All bets are off. So, I will say this. The greatest aspect of my life today is the same as it was when I first got here. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe I'm a member in good standing. I believe that I still want to always reach my hand out to the next alcoholic, whether you're just coming in or you're somebody that's been here a while that's just kind of sliding out the side door going, I just don't have time for this, or I'm tired of this, or any of it. I say never be, like Dr. Bob said, always have time to give somebody a pat on the back. And remember that this all simmers down to one thing. It's all about love, and it's about service. And we know what love is, and we know what service is. It's easy to do. All we got to do is, it's a lot easier when I'm doing it than when I'm not doing it. Thank you.